نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قال الله تعالى في شان حبيبي إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا على سيدنا مولانا محمد بارك وسلم عليه صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. The intention is in a couple of weeks to start talking about the Hajj, inshallah. Brother Abu Bakr has intention on going. He actually had intention last year, but with all the COVID stuff, and even this year, everything's still somewhat up in the air. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make things easy, and allow him to be able to go this year, inshallah. Of course, before I start talking about what I'm talking about, since I mentioned the Hajj, it's interesting that the last, 3 weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, the Saudi government implemented female police officers in the Haram, as well as in Medina Munawwara. And it's not even like they're wearing burqa, they're wearing like a European-style police uniform. And they're standing in the middle of the Hajis as they're making tawaf, or the people there for Umrah as they're making tawaf. And Rasulullah sallallahu he told us that Dajjal's army will consist mainly of women. And we see that, even now, where women are being put in the forefront on everything. In Islam, women should be well educated. But the priority of women is looking after the household, making sure that the household functions as a unit, making sure that the children are well educated. If we look in the history of Islam, and of course our ideals are the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We look at so many women who were extremely well educated. Asma bint Umais radiallahu anha, Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, the mother of the believers, and all of the mothers of the believers. Simply their contact with the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was their education. If we look at the leader of the women of Jannah, Bibi Fatimah salamullah alayha, her level of knowledge, none of us can even come close to. The wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said for us to take, in one narration a third, another narration a half of our religion from her. He didn't say take all of it. There's certain aspects, as far as outside of the household, that she was not a scholar of. But as far as her role and the role of other women, but even she said about Bibi Fatimah salamullah alayha that she never saw anyone more in accordance or in line with the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Bibi Fatimah salamullah alayha. To the extent that the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could not recognize when she was walking, when they heard her footsteps coming, and the footsteps of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, I was going to talk about Hudaybiyah. I'm going to talk about this tonight. So we'll just go off on this tangent, inshallah. There's a lot to say. It's interesting when we talk about footsteps. Imam Muhammad Baqir, who is the son of Imam Zain al-Abidin, who is the son of Imam Hussein al-Islam. One of the very close companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, radiallahu anhu, who loved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved him very much. So one day he's sitting in the masjid with the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam Hussein al-Islam comes. He's 3 or 4 maybe. Comes in, lays his head on the blessed thigh of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he looks at Jabir, and he says that this son of mine will have a son. And on the day of judgment, a caller will call out that, "O leader of the worshippers, come forth," and that son will come forward and lead many into Jannah with him. He says, and that son will have a son whose name will be upon my own. And he says, "O Jabir, you will meet him, and when you meet him, give him my salam." So the meeting is mentioned in Sahih Muslim. So it's not in like some obscure history book or some obscure book of hadith that no one knows about. It's in Sahih Muslim. Where Jabir radiallahu anh, at this point has lost, he's unable to see physically. So he's lost his sight. He's very old. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave him some wealth as a gift, and that wealth continued to benefit him throughout his life. Until Ayyam Hurra, which is the time when Yazid attacked Medina Munawwara. But by this point he had lost his sight, but he still used to give lectures in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he had many people sitting and listening to him. So he hears these footsteps coming in, and he says that, "I hear the footsteps of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam." And then when that person walking in comes and he sits in front of him and he asks him, he says, "What is your name?" And he says, "Muhammad." He says, "Muhammad what?" He says, "Muhammad ibn Ali." Because Imam Zain al-Abidin's actual name was Ali. He says, "Muhammad ibn Ali." So now he knows who he really is. He already knew, but now he has confirmed it. So he says to him, he says, "Come close." And he came close and he kisses him and he says, "I smell the fragrance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam coming from you." Because Rasulullah had this special fragrance. It wasn't the ithr that he put on. When the companions, they wanted to find him, they simply followed their noses. And that fragrance of Rasulullah, that was just something so special. They simply followed their noses and they would find him. So he says, "I smell the fragrance of Rasulullah coming from you." And he says, and Rasulullah told me to give you his salam. It's like when Ham bin Him bin Laqis bin Iblis, when he came to meet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came with the salam of Isa alayhi salam. And here, Jabir radiallahu anh is coming with the salam of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, coming back to Bibi Fatimah, salamullah alayha. So when she, as Bibi Aisha said, she said we couldn't even distinguish her walking from the walking of Rasulullah. So she was so on the sunnah. Because this is the one for whom Rasulullah said that she is a part of me. Badatu minni. And as we've mentioned before, the whole is the sum of the parts. So if the part is pure and innocent, then if the sum is pure and innocent, then each and every part must be pure and innocent. You can't have a pure gallon of water if every drop of that water isn't pure. It's just common sense. She's the one for whom he said that whatever pleases her pleases me, and whatever displeases her displeases me. Fatima itself, the name, means to disconnect. If you look at the origins of the word, it means to disconnect, to separate yourself. And if you look at her nature, she was disconnected from everything other than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If I talk about the world, Surah Insan, Ad-Dahr, revealed for them, for the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When maybe Sayyidina Ali, karamallahu wajh, he was so busy fulfilling the duties to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had no time for anything else. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would send him away for days or weeks. When he sent him to Yemen, he was gone for months. When you're fulfilling those duties, you don't have time to go and, establish a career. If you're not at your shop, even if you have a business, if you're not at your shop, the shop doesn't run. If you're not tending to the crops don't grow. And so Ali radiallahu anhu, when he had time, he would go and do some work to get enough food to eat at night. And until further, this was the condition of the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It'd be days and weeks and months. The stove, they wouldn't even burn a fire in the house because there's nothing to cook. You ate a few dates, you drank some water, that was it. And so, one of these days, Ali radiallahu anhu goes and he gets enough money to get some grains to make some bread. She grinds the grains. Because, you bought wheat or barley, it's whole, okay, so you have to grind it to make bread. So she would grind it, and she had calluses in her hands from doing this. Again, this is the leader of the women of Jannah, all of the women of Jannah, which includes the mothers of prophets and the wives of prophets. Because she is the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She is a part of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So she gets these, she grinds the grains, she makes some bread. As they're about to sit down and eat, knock on the door. Open the door. It's an orphan. It's a poor person, not an orphan. First night is a poor person, a beggar. Says, please give me something in the name of Allah. Ali was going to open the door. Tells his wife, beggar is here asking for something in the name of Allah. She takes the bread. Her and her children, they drink some water, go to sleep. The next day, same thing. He works, gets some grain. Now there's a knock on the door, and it's an orphan asking for something in the name of Allah. Without any hesitation, same thing. The third day, process all over again. This time it's a slave who had been freed, but he has nothing. Same process, same thing. Whatever they have, give him. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says what? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وعسيرا. There are those who, even in their need, they feed the beggars, the orphans, and the slaves. إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. And they say that we don't expect any reward from you, not even a thanks. Like today, you give something to somebody and say, oh, he didn't even say thank you. Yeah, they don't want anything. All for the pleasure of Allah and His Messenger. No complaints. None whatsoever. To the extent when this happens, Jibreel al-Islam comes to Rasulullah and he says, Ya Rasulullah. When he brings the revelation, he says, Ya Rasulullah, do something. We, the angels, we can't bear this. We can't bear seeing them like this. Please do something. So she is detached from the world. And also when we look at her interactions with everybody else, very limited. Only when she needed to. When her father's honor is threatened in Mecca when she's 6 years old, Uqba bin Abi Mu'ayth, under the spurring of Abu Jahl, when he brings the intestines of the camel and places them on Rasulullah when he was in the condition of sajda, she comes running out, pulling that off. And then she has some words with the leaders of Quraysh. Rasulullah, and then they chuckle at her. They have a laugh at her. They say some words and they have a laugh at her. And this is when Rasulullah, when he comes up from sajda, and again the hadith is in Sahih Muslim. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is the narrator. Rasulullah, he says, Oh Allah, curse Abu Jahl, Utbah, Shayba, Walid, Umayyah bin Khalaf, Uqba bin Abi Mu'ayth, and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud says there was one more that he could not remember. And all of them were killed in Badr. Why? Because they challenged, it wasn't because of what they did to him. They did what they did to him in the condition of salat, which is the right of Allah. So it's a challenge to that. Plus, they abused his daughter. And he said that whoever abuses her is kafir. It is challenging the pleasure of Rasulullah. Yeah. In Medina Munawwara, Rasulullah would give the khutbah in the masjid. She was so particular that her house was connected to the masjid, but she would not go to the door and listen. She would stay in the back of the house. This is when Imam Hassan al-Islam is maybe 3 or 4. Imam Hassan al-Islam was 3 or 4 years old, and like a 3 or 4-year-old, he's running around playing. Rasulullah is giving the khutbah. Everybody thinks, oh, he's not listening to anything. He doesn't know. But after every khutbah, after the salat, his mother had given him certain instructions. That whatever you hear from your grandfather, you come and tell me immediately. The wives of the companions of Rasulullah, they would tell them when they would go and leave the house that whatever you learn from Rasulullah, come and teach us. This is why they were not uneducated. But they also understood the etiquettes of education and what true education is. So Imam Hassan, as soon as Salat would end, he would come running and he would tell his mother everything Rasulullah has said exactly as he had said it. And by the time Ali would get back to the house, people are talking, and so he gets back to the house a little later, and he starts telling his wife that, Rasulullah said this, and she would tell him before he would finish, he said this, this, and this, and this. And he's wondering how does she know? So one day he comes early and he's listening in on the conversation between his son and his wife. Imam Hassan is telling, but now today Imam Hassan's tongue is kind of stumbling. It's never done this before, but now it's, there's like a catch at times. He'll start saying something and he'll pause. And she asks him, she says, oh son, what's wrong? Why are you stumbling as you're speaking to me? And he says that, the smaller scholar, when the bigger scholar is listening in, the tongue stumbles. It's like, you go someplace and even like, and you can extract this, to like in school, in college. You know everything very well. You go before your professor, and now it's like, you're a little nervous because, maybe I'll say something wrong. Because the professor knows better than you do. At least he should. These days you kind of question that, but at least he should. So his tongue kind of, even though before you had it down pat, you could roll it off just like this. And now it's like, you catch yourself up. Did I say that right? And so Imam Hassan al-Islam, even though Ali is behind the door on the other side, he's saying when the small scholar is talking and the big scholar is listening, the tongue stumbles. Again, this is the household of Rasulullah. When the verses came, about abna'ana wa abna'akum wa nisa'ana wa nisa'akum wa anfusana wa anfusakum. When the Christians of Najran, when they came to debate with Rasulullah, and they of course lost the debate, outright. But then, in the end, but we still believe. So now came the order from Mubaila. You come, and we invoke the curse of Allah on the liar. And so who does the Rasulullah ﷺ take as abna'akum, or abna'ana, as his sons? Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein as well. And who does he take as nisa'ana? And here the wording is your women, plural. Yet Rasulullah ﷺ takes who? Bibi Fatimah salamullah alayha. Because she is above all the women. And then when it says anfusana, yourself, who does he take as his own nafs? Other than the one from whom he said that you are my brother in this world and the next. Sayyidina Ali, karamallahu wajh. You know, and to downplay their significance is simply an indirect way of challenging the authority of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's all this is. You know, people who downplay this, you know, when he himself in Sahih Muslim, again Sahih Muslim, and he says, I'm leaving two very heavy things behind. The Quran and my itrit, my progeny. And he says, and the Quran will always, and the Quran and my household will always be together like this. Even until they meet me at the Hawd. So there is no way to understand the Quran other than seeing it through the eyes and the hearts of the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anyone who tries to understand it outside of that realm has no understanding. You know, that's why, like today, you know, there are people in the last couple of minutes, you know, with the Palestinian struggle, or the struggle in reality anywhere where the Muslims are, whether it's Kashmir or Burma, various parts of Africa. See, there are two major struggles going on. One is the physical struggle. That's what we see, like in Palestine and Kashmir. But then you have the spiritual struggle, which is in basically throughout the world. And that's where they're stealing our iman, like in Saudi and various parts of Arabia, where they're stealing our iman, and we don't even realize it. But when we look at the physical struggle, because there are people who say, oh, why do these people who have meager weapons fight against these powers that have such advanced weapons? You know, if you're going to fight, you need to be on equal footing. That's what they claim. There is no victory without the help of Allah. And when the help of Allah comes, it doesn't matter what you have. And the help of Allah only comes when you make that connection with the Rasulullah. So when we look throughout the history, and especially when we look at the history of Ahlul Bayt, we see these bright examples for us in these struggles. Imam Hussein alayhi salam and Karbala. 72 against 22,000. But they did not move from their position of haqq. They did not yield their position. And even though from a worldly standpoint, people think, oh, because they were killed and they lost, that's what they think is they lost. But the reality of what happened afterwards showed us no. They fulfilled their mission in saving Islam and creating other revolutions that would topple these governments, these oppressive regimes. We look at Imam Zayd, who was the uncle of Imam Ja'far Sadiq, the brother of Imam Muhammad Baqir, the son of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, and his revolution, where Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi financed the revolution and sent his students to go and said, whoever can go and fight alongside him, go and fight. He himself wanted to, but Imam Zayd said, no, you can't. You need to continue the process of teaching for now. We look at the revolution of Imam Muhammad Nafs Zakiyah, who is the son of Imam Abdullah Mez, who is the son of Imam Hassan Muthanna, who is the son of Imam Hassan al-Islam. He is the one to whom Imam Malik rahmatullahi gave allegiance to. He is the actual cause for why they tortured Imam Malik. They used the hadith as an excuse, but this is the real origins of it. All of them in appearance lost. But in reality, they fulfilled their mission by making sure that Islam survived. We have no Islam because we have lost that connection with Rasulullah and his family and all of those whom they love. Because if you look at the Ahlul Bayt, there's no one who defended the honor of the Sahaba Ikram more than the Ahlul Bayt. And there's no time, I've gone over time, otherwise I'd go into this topic too, as to how they defended the honor of the Sahaba. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to learn from them. And truly connect us to them. And give us their love and his own love, because there is no love of Allah without the love of Rasulullah. And there is no love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam without the love of Ahlul Bayt. And you cannot love Ahlul Bayt without loving the Sahaba Ikram, because they defended them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all of these things. Inshallah, we'll end here, and those who have not made sunnah, go and make sunnah, and then we'll start, inshallah.